NHL 24 is introducing a whole new controller layout that is going to drastically change how we play NHL. However, there were some things in the trailer that were not discussed. So in this video, I'm going to break down the new total control scheme layout and go over some of the things that are simply no longer in the game, like being able to hold left trigger and skate around backwards in the offensive zone. Yeah, like it's gone. One of the more hot button topics since the reveal trailer has been this new total control system. This year, EA looks to make all of the action a lot more accessible and simple when it comes to how you pull off the most exciting moves in the game. However, we need to touch on some of the things that they will be removing. In NHL 24, there will be no NHL 94 or hybrid controls. Both of those will be replaced with this new total control scheme layout. So there will be a bit of an adjustment for players that are still using hybrid in NHL 94. The skill stick will still be there. So for everyone that has utilized the skill stick for the last decade, don't worry, that's not going anywhere. So here is our first look at the total control offensive scheme layout. Now, I was able to test out the total control layout at my time in Vancouver, and for anyone that has utilized the skill stick over the last decade, it will definitely take some getting used to. The biggest change, obviously, is the one-button deeks. So in prior years, you would have to utilize the skill stick and move it in a set manner of ways to get the corresponding deke to be pulled off. On PlayStation 5, if you were to hit X, you'll get the one-hand tuck, which is back into the game. It is viable. Circle will give you the between the legs shot. You can then pass or shoot out of it while holding down circle. Square will give you the toe drag, and triangle or Y, depending on the console you're on, will give you a lacrosse move. So the one-button Michigan is definitely what a lot of people focused on. And again, in my prior videos, I'd mentioned I played a bunch of games when I was in Vancouver, and even when we were trying to pull them off in a normal game, the most basic level of defense nullified all of those attempts. Now, for the Michigan specifically, you did have to hold it down with a full press for about a second for you to pull it off. The other ones were pretty responsive. The other big change for a lot of players will be how you protect the puck. As you can see, on the left stick, you click in L3 and then utilize the right stick, left or right. That will give you the protect puck animation. This was much more awkward than how you would normally do it with the skill stick, because the X button is now being mapped to a one-hand tuck instead of protect the puck. The other issue that I ran into while adjusting to this layout was the reverse hit. So as you can see with the right thumbstick, you shoot and deke much like what you could with the skill stick, but by clicking in the right stick, you will do a reverse hit. We talked about that in the prior video as well. Reverse hit is going to be extremely effective in this game, but if you're anything like me, I kind of manhandle the controller a little bit, and I found myself going for shots, and then I would accidentally click it in, and I would get the shove animation. So that was a little frustrating. Outside of that, everything is pretty much the same. Vision control or back skating would be L2. Holding L1 will allow you to activate some of the other deeks, passing with R2 or RT, and then saucer passing with the R1 or RB button. Like I mentioned, I think that this is definitely going to play towards the less competitive players. It did allow for a lot more fun because you can still string together deeks and everything like that, and it's all with just one button. On top of that, every player will be able to pull off every deke. However, their deking rating in NHL 24 is going to dramatically change the speed in which that deke is pulled off. So someone like Ryan Reeves, while he might be able to do the one-hand tuck, it's going to be painfully slow compared to someone like Trevor Zegras. The other big thing coming to NHL 24 is icon passing, something that we've been asking for a long time. When you hold down right trigger, this will work on skill stick as well as total control schemes. The icons will pop up among the other players that are on the ice for you. By holding down or pressing the corresponding button, it will fire the puck to that player. Again, this will help out players that find passing a little bit more difficult because you no longer need to aim it with the skill stick. You can literally just press it to that button and it will go to that player. On top of that, if you queue up passes, meaning that you fire it to the player listed with X, and before it gets to the X player, you can hit circle and it will immediately one-touch pass to circle, setting up a lot of offensive opportunity. I found this really effective on the breakout specifically because I just found it much more noticeable on the ice. And like I mentioned earlier, the L2 or back skating has been completely nerfed. In NHL 24, it seems that when you hold down the left trigger in the offensive zone with the puck, your player just simply really won't turn his back to the goaltender. I tried a number of times, and every once in a while, I might be able to get him to look around, but it was nowhere near enough to be reliable. So that is going to be a drastic change online. While I do think it created a bit of a skill gap in the prior games, I simply can't stand when the skill gap in a sports video game is something that just really isn't in the sport itself. And moving on to the defensive side of things with the total control layout, again, the biggest changes are going to be on the face buttons. In NHL 24, the square or X button, depending if you're playing on Xbox, will put you in a hip check animation. In NHL 23 and years prior, it was a lot more complicated to get the hip check animation to pull it off. From my time playing it, this was the most fun because, again, it made it very simple to actually pull off the hip check. The other big change is the shoulder check button being circled. Not because we have a hit button, but because of how hitting is now going to work in NHL 24. They actually broke apart hitting and what we refer to as bumping. So in NHL 23 and years prior, you'd basically just hold up on the right thumbstick, and your speed carrying into the player you're trying to hit, it would determine if you would actually pull off a massive hit, or you would just bump and try and get them to get a stumble animation to lose the puck. In NHL 24, the shoulder check button would be what your big hit would be considered. However, if you just flick up on the right thumbstick, that will put you into a shove check, which would be known as like the bump animation from years past. This was definitely the biggest adjustment when it came to playing defense. I found that my own personal tendencies were to just hold up on the right thumbstick until I ran into the player. However, if you do that, well, the second that you press up on the right thumbstick, your player will do a shove animation. So you could get completely flat-footed because you didn't time it right. On top of that, to actually pull off a massive hit, you've got to essentially take a slap shot. So if you were using the hit stick instead of the shoulder check button, you'd basically pull back on the right thumbstick, and then when you were looking to hit the player, you would go up all the way through, and that would deliver the full power body check. This is definitely going to be a little bit of a learning curve to get used to, and I think early on it's going to cause a lot of frustrations, but once you get the hang of it, it's pretty simple. Now, like I mentioned, I think the more competitive players will just stick to the skill stick option, but once you get used to the total control system, it makes things a lot simpler, and I think that was their goal with this being implemented. They wanted everyone to be able to do the flashy moves much easier. The one thing that I think a lot of people are bringing up is the fact that now there might not be a skill gap. Players that were masters of the skill stick and how to deke and everything like that, they no longer have that big of an advantage because lesser skilled players can just use one button. The one thing I'm interested in seeing is if because of the full pressure system, if we see cycling and setting up plays and one-touch passes become the skill gap. I'm super excited for everyone to get their hands on the beta, but let me know in the comment section down below what you think of the new total control system, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already for the most up-to-date news, tips, and info for NHL 24. Have a good one.